"A silent girl has no defense," Marcus Vale declared, and the silver chains around Emma Walker's wrists answered with a cold little sound. The entire Blackridge pack stood in the stone courtyard beneath a pale winter sky, watching her as if silence were proof of guilt. Snow drifted over the dark flagstones, soft enough to look merciful, but Emma felt every flake land on her skin like another witness that would not speak for her. She was 26 years old, dressed in a plain cream-work dress and a worn gray shawl, her pale hands locked before her by ceremonial chains that were supposed to represent justice. They looked more like a warning. Do not be different. Do not be weak. Do not be unable to explain yourself when powerful people decide what your silence means. Marcus stood on the judgment steps in a black wool coat trimmed with silver, his broad shoulders squared toward the crowd. He was not the true alpha of Blackridge, only the temporary pack governor until the Northern Crown completed its inspection, but he wore borrowed authority as if it had always belonged to him. Beside him, Brianna Cole watched Emma with polished calm, her dark green cloak spotless, her blonde hair tucked beneath a velvet hood. Brianna had always smiled most beautifully when someone else was losing everything. The relief medicines prepared for the royal inspection were found ruined, Marcus continued. The only person seen near the herb room after midnight was this Omega. The word Omega passed through the crowd with the same tone people used for cracked tools and spoiled grain. Emma lifted her eyes, trying to find one face willing to remember her differently. She saw Mrs. Harlow, whose little grandson Emma had cooled through a 3-day fever. She saw old Mr. Bell, who could still walk to council because Emma brought him willow tea every morning. She saw mothers whose children had slept under blankets Emma mended by candlelight. Their eyes slid away from hers. That was when the cold entered deeper than the chains ever could. Emma opened her mouth, but no sound came. Nothing had come for 3 years. Not since the night smoke filled the herb storehouse and the pack decided grief had made her strange. She had learned to speak with hands, notes, glances, and small acts of care. But in a courtyard hungry for blame, kindness had no voice loud enough to matter. Marcus held up a wooden placard marked with her alleged crime. Before the Northern King arrives, Blackridge will show that it does not protect weakness or deceit. A murmur of approval moved through the pack. Emma's fingers tightened around each other until the chains trembled. She did not cry. Crying would become another accusation. Instead, she looked past the crowd toward the North Road, where black pines bent under snow and a line of travelers had stopped near the gate. One of them stood apart, tall beneath a dark hooded cloak, still as a shadow carved from winter. She could not see his face, only the faint glint of silver eyes watching from beneath the hood. Marcus raised his hand toward the judgment post behind her. Let the silent girl stand where all liars stand. Emma took one step back, not in defiance, but because her body remembered fear even when her heart refused to kneel. The chains gave another soft sound. The stranger at the gate did not move, but the air around him seemed to sharpen. And for the first time that morning, Emma wondered whether someone in Blackridge was finally listening to what she could not say. Emma did not look at the judgment post again. She kept her eyes on the snow between her shoes, because the courtyard was full of memories wearing human faces, and each one hurt more than the chains. Blackridge had not always felt like a place waiting to condemn her. Once, before silence became the first thing people noticed, she had moved through the pack like a small steady light no one thought to name. She rose before dawn in the kitchen hall, when the ovens were still black and the windows glowed blue with morning frost. She ground dried mint, willow bark, and lavender in the herb room until her fingertips carried the scent all day. She folded blankets for the nursery, warmed broth for elders, and left extra bread beside doors where pride would not allow anyone to ask for help. None of those things had ever made her important. They only made her useful, and useful people were easy to blame when the powerful needed a clean story. 3 years earlier, after the herb storehouse burned in the old wing, Emma's voice had disappeared into the smoke and never found its way back. She remembered running through halls full of alarm bells, clutching a box of medicine ledgers against her chest because the records mattered more than the shelves. She remembered trying to call for someone trapped behind the storage door, but the sound in her throat broke into nothing. By morning, Blackridge had a story. The silent girl had been near the fire. The silent girl had survived when better people had not. The silent girl made everyone uncomfortable, so they let discomfort become suspicion. Since then, Emma had answered the world with paper notes, careful gestures, and a gentleness people accepted when they needed it, then mocked when they did not. Brianna Cole had been the first to give her that name in public. The silent girl. She had said it with a smile at a winter dinner, and the pack had laughed because Brianna was beautiful, wealthy, and safe to please. Emma had been carrying tea when it happened. She had lowered her eyes, placed the tray down without spilling a drop, and returned to the kitchen before anyone could see her hands shaking. Now Brianna stood beside Marcus Vale while the same name tightened around Emma like another chain. "She cannot deny it," Brianna said, her voice smooth enough to sound almost kind. "If she were innocent, surely she would tell us." The crowd murmured agreement, relieved by the simplicity of it. Emma lifted her bound hands, trying to sign the words she had written again and again since dawn. The medicine was not ruined. The labels were changed. "Check the blue crate." But Marcus turned away before she finished. "Enough gestures," he said. "Blackridge needs truth, not pantomime." A few people laughed softly. Emma lowered her hands. At the edge of the courtyard, the tall stranger in the dark cloak remained near the north gate. Wind pulled at the hem of his cloak, revealing a glimpse of black armor beneath plain travel wool. He watched Marcus refuse her signs. He watched Brianna smile. He watched the crowd choose comfort over courage. Then, near the front row, a little boy began coughing, his breath catching hard in the cold. His mother bent toward him in panic. Emma's head snapped up. She knew that sound. She had heard it last winter in the nursery. Without thinking of herself, she raised her chained hands and pointed toward the small leather pouch tied at her waist, then toward the boy, then toward the herb table behind Marcus. Her wrists trembled under the weight of the silver, but her meaning was clear if anyone cared enough to see it. "Use the amber vial. 2 drops in warm water. Please." Brianna rolled her eyes. Even now, she performs innocence. But the stranger at the gate finally moved. The stranger's first step across the courtyard was quiet, but the effect of it spread faster than shouting. People turned before they understood why. The mother with the coughing child clutched her son close, torn between fear of disrupting the judgment and fear of ignoring the only person who seemed to know how to help him. Emma kept pointing, her chained wrists lifted toward the amber vial on the herb table. The boy's breath caught again, small and frightening in the winter air, and for one sharp moment, every accusation against Emma felt foolish beside the simple need of a child trying to breathe. Marcus noticed the shift and hardened his voice. "Do not touch the evidence." Emma shook her head quickly, eyes wide, then pointed again. "Amber vial, warm water, child." Her mouth opened with the effort of a word that would not come. Nothing. Only breath. Only desperation trapped behind silence. Brianna gave a soft, impatient laugh. How convenient. She creates a crisis, then pretends she alone can solve it. The stranger stopped near the front of the crowd. He was close enough now that Emma could see the lower half of his face beneath the hood, pale and still, with no trace of amusement. His cloak was dark, dusted with snow, and beneath it the edge of black armor caught the light like midnight ice. He looked at the child first, then at the herb table, then at Emma's bound hands. "Which vial?" he asked. The courtyard went still. No one had asked her a real question since the judgment began. Emma lifted her hands as high as the chains allowed and pointed to the amber glass. The stranger turned to Marcus. "Give it to the boy." Marcus's eyes narrowed. This matter does not concern travelers. A child struggling for breath concerns anyone with a conscience. The words were calm, but they cut through the courtyard cleanly. A few people shifted. The mother looked toward Marcus with pleading eyes. Marcus hesitated, not from compassion, but from calculation. Refusing help in front of the entire pack would look ugly with the royal inspection so near. He snapped his fingers at a guard. 1 drop. No more. Emma shook her head hard. 2. She lifted 2 fingers. The guard ignored her. The stranger did not. She said 2. Brianna's smile thinned. She did not say anything. The stranger looked at her then, and even from the platform Emma felt the cold in that gaze. "No. You simply chose not to listen." The guard poured 2 drops into warm water, and the mother guided it carefully to the child. The courtyard waited. The boy coughed once, then again, and slowly his breathing softened. His mother began to cry silently into his hair. A whisper moved through the pack, uneasy and low. Emma lowered her hands, not with triumph, but with relief, so deep her knees nearly weakened. Marcus saw the change in the crowd and stepped forward quickly, trying to regain control. A lucky guess does not erase sabotage. The stranger turned toward the herb table. If she destroyed the medicine, why does she still know which vial can save the child? No one answered. Snow fell between them, gentle and merciless. Marcus's jaw tightened. Because she worked in the herb room. That proves access. Emma tried again, signing faster now despite the weight at her wrists. Blue crate. Wrong labels. Not ruined. Switched. The stranger watched every motion carefully, as if her silence had a language worth respecting. She is saying the medicine was not ruined, he said. She is saying the labels were changed. Brianna's face flickered. It was small, gone almost instantly, but Emma saw it. So did the stranger. Marcus raised his hand. Enough. I will not have this judgment interrupted by a man without standing. The stranger stepped closer to the judgment platform. His voice lowered, but everyone heard it. Then ask yourself why a girl in chains is the only person here still trying to save someone. Emma looked at him, and for the first time, the cold silver of his eyes did not frighten her. It steadied her. The courtyard that had been built to condemn her had begun, quietly, to doubt. Marcus Vale heard the doubt spreading before anyone dared speak it. It moved through the courtyard in lowered eyes, shifting boots, and whispers that dissolved the moment he looked their way. For years, Blackridge had obeyed loud men quickly and quiet women slowly, and Marcus had built his power inside that habit. Now one stranger in a dark cloak had made the pack look at Emma Walker as if she were not an accusation standing in chains, but a person they had failed to understand. Marcus stepped down from the judgment stairs, his black coat moving sharply in the wind. This court will not be led by theater, he said. The child has been helped. The charge remains. Emma's relief faded as two guards moved toward the judgment post behind her. The silver chains at her wrists were connected to a longer ceremonial line, one used only for public sentencing. She knew what it meant. Not pain, not danger, something colder. Display. A living warning carved into ritual. Brianna Cole walked closer, graceful over the snow as if the courtyard existed to frame her. You should have stayed invisible, she murmured, low enough that only Emma and the stranger could hear. A voiceless Omega survives by being useful, not by making powerful people look foolish. Emma's fingers tightened. She wanted to answer. She wanted one clear sentence, one clean sound, one word strong enough to reach the people who had eaten from her hands and now stood silent while she was made small. But her throat closed around nothing. Brianna smiled at the emptiness where Emma's voice should have been. See? Still nothing. The stranger's gaze shifted to Brianna, and the cold in it made her smile falter. Silence is not permission. The words were quiet, but they struck harder than Marcus's command. Emma looked at him then, really looked. Beneath the hood, his face was pale, controlled, and severe, too still to belong to an ordinary traveler. Snow clung to the dark wool at his shoulders. The armor beneath his cloak bore no visible crest, but it had the clean, practical lines of the far north, where beauty was never added unless it could survive a war road. Marcus noticed it too. You speak as if you have authority here. I speak as if authority should be questioned when it chains the only person trying to save a child. A few people drew breath. Marcus's expression hardened. Attach her to the post. The guards hesitated, not because they disagreed with him, but because the stranger had made obedience feel visible. Emma felt one guard take the loose chain, his hand trembling slightly. She did not resist. She had learned that resistance from an Omega was often renamed threat before it was understood as fear. Instead, she looked toward the herb table and lifted her bound hands again, signing with slower care. Blue crate. Wrong labels. Check the seal. The stranger followed the motion. Open the blue crate, he said. Marcus snapped. No, the answer came too fast. The courtyard heard it. Brianna turned sharply toward him, warning in her eyes. But the mistake had already landed. The stranger tilted his head. If the evidence proves her guilt, why are you afraid of opening it? Marcus's jaw flexed. Because I will not have royal relief supplies handled by strangers. At the northern gate, one of the supposed travelers shifted, cloak parting just enough to reveal a silver wolf badge before it vanished again. Emma saw it. The stranger saw that she saw it. His eyes met hers for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Wait. Trust the truth 1 heartbeat longer. The child's mother stepped forward, still holding her son. Please, she said, voice shaking. She has never harmed my boy. She has never harmed any of ours. Another woman whispered. She sat with my mother when the fever came. Marcus raised his voice over them. Sentiment does not overturn evidence. The stranger answered immediately. Then show the evidence. Snow fell harder. The courtyard stood suspended between old fear and new courage. Emma's chained hands ached from being held up, but she did not lower them. The amber vial had saved the child. The blue crate could save her. And the man in the black cloak, whoever he was, had begun pulling the truth into daylight. The blue crate sat behind the herb table like a small locked door between truth and ruin. Emma could not stop looking at it. Her wrists ached under the silver chains, and the loose ceremonial line now trailed from her hands toward the judgment post, waiting for Marcus Vale to make his warning complete. Yet the courtyard had changed. The same people who had arrived ready to condemn her were no longer breathing in one rhythm. Doubt had divided them. Some watched Marcus. Some watched Brianna. Some watched the stranger in the black cloak as if his stillness had become a verdict waiting to speak. Marcus understood that, and anger sharpened his face. This ends now, he said. The girl will be held until the royal inspection is complete. Emma's heart dropped. Held meant hidden. Hidden meant the story would be rewritten before anyone important could read it. Brianna stepped forward with a soft sigh, pretending sorrow as easily as other people wore gloves. It is mercy, really. If the Northern King sees disorder here, Blackridge suffers. One Omega's mistake should not shame the entire pack. Emma lifted her bound hands again, but Marcus gestured to the guards. The chain line tightened. She stumbled one small step, catching herself before she fell. The stranger moved then, not quickly, but with such controlled authority that both guards froze. Release the line. Marcus turned on him. You are testing my patience. No, the stranger said. I am measuring your fear. The words struck the courtyard like a bell. Marcus's hand curled at his side. You have no standing in Blackridge. The stranger looked toward the blue crate. Then let the evidence stand. Brianna's composure cracked for the briefest second, and Emma saw the truth there, bright and terrible. The labels had been changed. The relief medicine had not been ruined. Someone had meant to blame her before the royal party arrived. Emma signed faster, her fingers clumsy from cold. Blue crate. Silver seal. Brianna. Marcus. Her throat tightened around silent urgency. The stranger watched every motion. She says the silver seal on the blue crate was changed. Brianna laughed too loudly. Now he speaks for her? How touching. Someone should, he answered, when everyone else profits from her silence. A murmur spread. The child's mother took another step forward. Open it. Then old Mr. Bell, leaning on his cane, said, Open the crate. Another voice joined. Then another. Not brave at first. Not loud. But real. Emma felt the sound move around her like warmth returning to a numb hand. Marcus raised both arms. Enough. The courtyard quieted, but not fully. That mattered. Fear had not disappeared, but it had lost its perfect shape. The stranger reached to the clasp at his throat and loosened it. Beneath the dark cloak, a silver badge flashed, a wolf beneath 7 northern stars. Several of the supposed travelers near the gate lowered their heads at once. Marcus went still. Brianna took a step back. The stranger did not remove his hood yet. He only said, Open the blue crate. This time, no one mistook it for a request. A guard moved to the herb table with trembling hands and lifted the lid. Inside, neat rows of amber and blue vials rested in straw, each one sealed, unbroken, and marked with royal relief stamps. The crowd exhaled in shock. Emma closed her eyes for half a second, not in victory, but in the painful relief of knowing truth still existed even when people refused to see it. The guard picked up one vial, then another. The medicine is intact, he said quietly. The stranger's voice lowered. Read the labels. The guard swallowed. The outer labels are wrong. The royal seals beneath them do not match. Marcus's face emptied of color. Brianna's hand clenched in her cloak. Emma looked at them, and the final piece settled inside her with devastating clarity. They had not believed she was guilty. They had needed her to be voiceless enough to carry their guilt for them. The stranger lifted his head, silver eyes burning cold beneath the hood. A chain placed by fear is not law, he said. It is confession. The words settled over Blackridge like winter judgment, and for the first time since Emma Walker had been brought into the courtyard, Marcus Vale had nothing ready to say. The blue crate stood open on the herb table, its vials whole, its royal seals intact beneath false labels that had been carefully placed by hands that expected no one to question them. Emma stared at the rows of medicine through a blur she refused to let become tears. She had known the truth. She had pointed to it. She had begged without a voice for anyone to look. Yet seeing it exposed did not feel like triumph. It felt like standing in the ashes of a house and realizing the fire had been set by people who smiled while handing you water. Brianna Cole recovered with a sharp breath. This proves nothing, she said, though her voice had lost its shine. Labels can be confused during packing. The Omega worked in the herb room. She still had access. The stranger turned toward her slowly. And yet she pointed us to the very crate that cleared the medicine. Brianna's mouth closed. Marcus stepped forward, trying to rebuild authority from broken pieces. Enough. Until the Northern King arrives, I remain the appointed governor of Blackridge. I will decide what this evidence means. At the gate, the supposed travelers moved as one. Cloaks shifted. Black armor appeared beneath plain wool. Silver wolf badges caught the pale daylight. A sound passed through the crowd, soft and frightened, as men and women who had looked like traitors lowered themselves to one knee facing the stranger. Emma felt the world tilt. Marcus froze. Brianna's face went white. The stranger reached up and removed his hood. Snow clung to dark hair. His face was pale, severe, and impossibly calm, carved with the kind of authority that did not need to announce itself because every oath in the courtyard had already recognized him. The silver badge at his throat gleamed, wolf beneath 7 stars. I am here, he said. The words were simple, but they broke Marcus's borrowed power cleanly in half. Someone near the back whispered the name first. King Caleb Northwood, the Iron Wolf of the North. Then the whisper spread until it filled the courtyard. Emma stopped breathing for a moment. The man who had listened to her silence was not a traveler, not a witness by chance. He was the Alpha King Marcus had been trying to impress, the ruler Brianna had hoped would arrive only after Emma had been hidden away. Caleb looked past the kneeling soldiers to Marcus. You intended to present order to me by chaining the person who protected your relief medicine. Marcus lowered his head too late. Your Majesty, I believe the evidence indicated guilt. Caleb's eyes moved to the open crate. No, you believed silence would not contradict you. The crowd went still. Emma felt the sentence reach every place inside her where old humiliation had been stored. Caleb stepped toward the judgment platform, stopping before the chain line that still connected her wrists to the post. His expression changed when he looked at the silver around her hands. The coldness remained, but beneath it was something steadier than anger. Responsibility. Emma Walker, he said, and her name sounded different in his voice, not like a charge, not like a burden, but like a truth restored. Do you want these chains removed? The courtyard waited. No one had ever asked her what she wanted when power had already decided. Emma looked at Marcus, at Brianna, at the blue crate, at the child now breathing easier in his mother's arms. Then she looked at Caleb and nodded once. Caleb removed his black glove, reached for the ceremonial lock, and held it in his bare hand as if the metal itself had to answer to him. Then they come off before everyone who watched them go on. The ceremonial lock rested in Caleb Northwood's bare hand, small and silver and suddenly exposed for what it was. Not justice, not order, only a polished excuse for fear. Emma stood very still as the Alpha King examined it. Snow gathered on his dark hair and along the shoulders of his black armor, but he did not seem to feel the cold. The courtyard felt it for him. Every breath around them had gone quiet. Every eye fixed on the place where his fingers touched the chain that had made her shame public. Caleb looked toward Marcus Vale. Who authorized this restraint? Marcus swallowed. It is Blackridge custom for public judgment. Custom is not innocence. Caleb's voice remained calm, and that made it heavier. And a chain does not become lawful because a crowd agrees to watch it. Emma felt those words move through her slowly. For 3 years, she had believed silence made her smaller in the eyes of the world. But Caleb spoke as if the failure had never been hers. He turned back to her, lowering his voice. This may startle you. Emma nodded once. He did not pull. He did not wrench. He pressed his thumb against the royal notch hidden inside the lock, and the silver mechanism opened with a clean snap. The loose line fell first, sliding from the judgment post into the snow. Then the cuffs around her wrists opened one by one. The sound they made when they dropped to the stone was soft, almost delicate, but the courtyard reacted as if a bell had rung from the mountains. Emma stared at her freed hands. Pale marks circled her skin where the metal had rested, not deep, not dangerous, but humiliating in their perfect shape. She flexed her fingers, and for the first time that morning, her hands belonged only to her. Caleb stepped back, giving her space before anyone could mistake freedom for possession. That single step nearly broke her more than the chains had. Brianna Cole spoke too quickly. "Your Majesty, the misunderstanding was unfortunate, but surely not intentional." Caleb did not look at her immediately. He picked up one fallen chain from the snow and held it just long enough for the pack to see. A misunderstanding does not come with a lock. Brianna's face tightened. Marcus tried to speak, but Caleb raised one hand, and the northern officers moved to the herb table. "Record the crate. Record the seals. Record every person who signed the accusation." The officers opened ledgers, checked labels, compared stamps, and placed each vial carefully back in order. The process was quiet, exact, and impossible to argue with. Emma watched the truth become official one line at a time. The mother of the rescued child stepped forward, tears shining on her cheeks. "She knew the right medicine," she said. "She saved him." Old Mr. Bell lifted his cane slightly. "She has been saving us for years." Another voice followed from the nursery keeper, then another from the kitchen hall. Not grand speeches, not enough to erase what they had allowed. But each truth loosened something inside Emma that had been tied tighter than the chains. Caleb listened without interrupting. When the voices faded, he looked at Emma. "Do you want their testimony recorded?" The question held no pressure, only choice. Emma looked at the people who had been silent when it was easy and brave only after the king arrived. Pain rose in her, but beneath it was something steadier. She nodded. Caleb turned to his officer. "Recorded under her name, not her rank." The officer bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." Emma's throat tightened around a sound that almost existed. It trembled there, fragile as thawing ice, then disappeared. Caleb saw the effort and did not demand more. Instead, he removed the dark northern cloak from his shoulders and held it out, waiting for her permission before placing it around her. Emma reached for it herself. The cloak was heavy, warm, and lined with black fur, smelling faintly of pine, snow, and distant fires. As it settled over her cream dress and gray shawl, the courtyard lowered its gaze. The silent girl they had chained now stood beneath the protection of the northern crown, and no one dared call her voiceless again. The northern cloak changed how the courtyard looked at Emma, but it did not change how she felt inside. Freedom had arrived so suddenly that her heart still expected the chains to pull tight again. She stood beside Caleb Northwood with the black fur heavy over her shoulders, her cream dress showing beneath it, her freed hands held close to her chest as if they needed time to believe they were hers. Around her, Blackridge pack shifted under the weight of everything it had witnessed, the child breathing easier, the blue crate opened, the false labels exposed, the Alpha King standing where Marcus Vale had expected obedience. Yet the deepest silence belonged to Emma. It was no longer the silence they had mocked. It was the silence of someone deciding what to do with a truth returned too late. Caleb turned to the gathered pack. "The relief medicine will be counted and delivered under Northern Guard. The accusation against Emma Walker is void." Marcus lifted his head with visible effort. "Your Majesty, I acted for the safety of Blackridge." Caleb's silver eyes settled on him. "You acted for control and called it safety." Brianna's face tightened, but she tried one final softness. "She cannot testify. She cannot explain what she saw. Without her voice, everything remains uncertain." The words struck Emma exactly where they were meant to. For a moment, the old shame rose in her throat, familiar and cold. Without her voice, without her defense, without her place. Then the cloak warmed around her shoulders, and Caleb did not answer for her. He only looked at Emma and waited, as if her silence had the right to arrive in its own form. Emma stepped toward the herb table. The crowd parted. Her hands trembled, but she reached for the blue crate, lifted one amber vial, then peeled back the false paper label with careful fingers. Beneath it, The original royal seal shone intact. She placed it beside a second vial, then a third, arranging them in a clear line. After that, she pointed to the storage ledger, to Brianna's signature beside the late-night inventory entry, and then to Marcus's approval mark beneath it. The northern officer followed each gesture, reading aloud what her hands revealed. Inventory transferred after midnight. Outer labels replaced before dawn. Authorization signed by Marcus Vale. Witnessed by Brianna Cole. The courtyard exhaled. Brianna stepped back as if the words themselves had pushed her. Emma looked at Caleb, then tapped her own chest once and pointed to the herb room, key hanging from Marcus's belt. She shook her head. The officer understood. She is saying she did not have the key. Caleb turned to Marcus. Who did? Marcus said nothing. The answer was on his belt, silver against black wool. Emma's throat tightened again, not with fear this time, but with something rising from far below it. She touched the pale marks on her wrists. The air grew strangely still. A soft silver light appeared beneath her skin, circling both wrists where the chains had rested. Gasps moved through the pack. Caleb went motionless. The light shaped itself into a delicate mark of a crescent moon beneath a northern wolf, glowing where the metal had tried to shame her. Emma stared at it, frightened and breathless. Brianna whispered, "That is impossible." One of Caleb's oldest officers lowered his head. The Luna mark. The courtyard dropped into awe. Emma pressed one hand to her throat as a sound broke free, small, rough, and barely more than air, but real. "Truth," she whispered. The word trembled in the winter air. Caleb's expression softened in a way that made the entire world feel less cold. He bowed his head to her, not as a king to a subject, but as power recognizing the one it had failed to protect. "Then truth will be heard," he said. The word truth remained in the courtyard long after Emma Walker spoke it, fragile and rough, but stronger than every accusation that had tried to bury her. No one laughed. No one looked away. The same pack that had watched her wrists locked in silver now stared at the crescent moon and northern wolf glowing softly on her skin, and the shame in their faces was finally too visible to hide behind custom. Caleb Northwood stood beside her, tall and cold in black armor, his cloak now wrapped around her shoulders, his authority quiet enough to feel absolute. "Record her testimony through gesture, witness, and seal," he commanded. A voice is not the only form of truth. The northern officer bowed and began writing. Emma looked down at her marked wrists, then at the open blue crate, the false labels, the signatures, the key on Marcus Vale's belt. Every piece was small by itself. Together, they became a door she could finally walk through. Marcus tried one last time to speak, but the words failed under the weight of evidence. Brianna Cole stood pale and silent, her beauty no longer able to soften what her choices had revealed. Caleb did not humiliate them. He did not need spectacle to prove power. He simply turned to his guards and said, "Place them under royal inquiry. Every relief shipment, every Omega judgment, every sealed order under their authority will be reviewed." The order moved through Blackridge like a thawing river. Some people lowered their heads in fear, others in relief. Mrs. Harlow stepped forward with her grandson pressed close to her side. "Emma," she whispered, using her name as if returning something stolen. Old Mr. Bell bowed with shaking dignity. One by one, the people who had received her kindness remembered it aloud. "She warmed our kitchen. She brought medicine. She stayed when others left." The words did not erase the chains, but they loosened the silence around them. Emma listened, tears shining without falling. Caleb looked to her, giving her the space to accept or reject the moment. She placed one hand over the Luna mark, then slowly signed, "Start with the sick." The officer read it aloud. Caleb's eyes softened. "Even now, you choose mercy first." Emma met his gaze. Her voice tried to return and broke into breath, but this time she did not feel ashamed. She lifted her hand and pointed to the nursery road, then to the herb crate, then to the northern guards. Caleb understood. The medicine goes to the children and elders before any hearing begins. The pack bowed, not because Marcus ordered it, not because Brianna shaped the room with fear, but because the girl they had called silent had just decided the first act of justice would be care. Caleb offered his arm, but did not take her hand. Emma chose to place her fingers lightly on his sleeve, and together they stepped down from the judgment platform. The chains lay behind them in the snow, silver and useless. When her feet touched the courtyard stones, the Luna mark glowed once more, and somewhere in the old northern oaths, something ancient seemed to wake. Caleb looked toward the road leading to Northreach, where dark pines bent beneath the winter sky. "The palace will not welcome what happened here," he said quietly. Emma touched her throat, then shaped one careful word with all the strength she had left. "Let." It was not enough to form a sentence, but Caleb understood the meaning. Let them see. Let them fear truth. Let them know she was coming. He gave a faint, almost impossible smile. "Then we go north." Behind them, Blackridge lowered its head, and above the council balcony, hidden behind frosted glass, a noble envoy sealed a letter with black wax. The silent Omega had spoken before the Iron Wolf, and by nightfall, every enemy in Northreach would know the chains had not broken her. They had revealed her.